Welcome everybody to the end user town hall. This is going to be a nice, chill session. We're going to be asking from the audience. You'll find microphones back here, I believe. I'm going to let the end user tab introduce themselves, but first I'll tell you why we're here, what we're doing. My name is Taylor Dolezal. I'm the head of ecosystem for the CNCF. I get to work with end users like the ones you see sitting right here every day. It's lots of fun. There's lots of tools available in the CNCF ecosystem, right? But putting them together and creating workflows, that's what end users are focused on. The Intuits, Adobes, Apples, all of these companies trying to figure things out that aren't cloud service providers and otherwise vendors. For a long time, the CNCF was consisted of three pillars. It was the governing board, the technical oversight committee, and then end users. And we just kind of hand-waved at end users because they were there, but there wasn't a governing body to help facilitate questions, publish things, and get all of these assets that are helpful together in a way that's consumable. But we saw that gap, and now we have our end user technical advisory board. The board consists of 13 members. We have 3 of them here today. The others are at some other engagements and things, but invite any questions on that front. With that, I'd like to turn over to you, Mike. And if you'd like to introduce yourself, tell a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Mike Bowen. I work at BlackRock. Been there for 16 years. We are we big advocates of both open source and the CNCF Linux Foundation overall. We building a lot of products, having a lot of fun with it. We think the being able to partner with nonprofits and quality open source software helps us achieve our business goals faster. So we're really excited to be a representative on the tab and to work with all these fine people, and look forward to questions and talking to all of you. Aloita?
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Aloita Sharma, and I am the chair for the Technical Advisory Board of the end users. Again, super excited to have been part of, co-founding, I would say, the end user tab. And I represent Apple as well as our support, if you will, for the CNCF ecosystem, and of course for all of us in platform infrastructure and platform engineering. We deeply care about the projects and the technologies that the projects innovate in to be healthy, as well as some of the excellent work that the tab is doing with the reference architectures, which we will be actually talking about in our keynote tomorrow. And with that said, Henrik.
Thank you. So, is this on? Yeah. So my name is Henrik Blixt. I run part of platform product management at Intuit. So everything that touches Kubernetes, service mesh, API gateway, build platform, and whatnot. And I have a long history as a vendor, so I've seen that side of the coin. Now I'm an end user, so I'm really excited to take some of those learnings as a vendor and take that with me into the end user world and cover some of the gaps that I know that a lot of us end users struggle with as an end user in making sense of the cloud native ecosystem, and how do I productize all these things, and how do I put these 200 things together into something that actually I can put into production that doesn't fall over the next day, and how do I learn from other end users, and how do I make sense of all this without having maybe to talk to vendors and just kind of get what's the real deal, what's the real story, and figure out what works. So I'm really excited to help drive some of these initiatives through the tab, and I think the charter we've been given by CNCF, I think, has given us a lot of leeway and a lot of cover to kind of chart our own path in making this something really valuable for end users. So I know that right now we actually have more vendors than end users in CNCF, but I'm pretty sure that the number of end users actually outnumber the vendors by an order of at least a couple of magnitudes, right? So I think there's a lot more we can do for you. There's a lot more that we all can do for CNCF to make this a much better place for end users.
I think also to kick things off, would you like to cover some of the things that you've worked on this year? It's up to you if you want to give us, just an allusion to what's going to happen tomorrow at the keynote, but reference architectures, case studies, things of that like.
Sure. I mean, I can start, and Henrik, please feel free to add. And also, so I think when we started at the beginning of this year, Our objective really was, first of all, to actually have a collective forum as end users to be able to provide not only feedback in a unified way back to the projects as well as to the foundation, but also to be able to share best practices and solutions at scale that each of us has built over time with CNCF technologies to be able to share and learn from each other. So with that, in context, what as a team we decided to do is focus in on 3 initiatives, which we will be talking more in detail about tomorrow in the morning keynote. And fundamentally, we went after, first of all, knowledge sharing and publication of reference architectures in which many of the CNCF projects and technologies have been used. And for many of you who are already perhaps following our repo on GitHub in the CNCF/tab repo, you will see that there are reference architecture discussions as well as publications that are happening there actively. In fact, some of the companies have already started publishing and donating, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow in the keynote. The other area, again, and I think Henrik, you should definitely go into more detail on the reference architectures because I know you've been deeply involved there. The other 2 areas I'd just briefly like to call out, and perhaps we can go through some of those other areas, is project health and project feedback, right? And those were 2 other areas that we actually decided to dig in and do some foundational work in to be able to establish the process for how do we communicate back, project feedback that we may have as end users, whether that is really, what are some of the gaps that are in the technologies that are being used, or that where additional features that are needed, or enhancements, or evolution of the stack for scaling, reliability, production readiness, and all of the above, right? The other area is project health, which is very critical, again, to our investment into the CNCF ecosystem, as we all deeply care about the healthiness, if you will, of each project, and not to be able to take uninformed decisions, right? When we are adopting technologies as end users, to be able to take good decisions. So based on that, maybe Henrik, you can go through the reference architectures and talk more about some of the other areas.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much because then they won't show up at the keynote tomorrow. But we can maybe say a few things. So I think one of the cool things that I think it's fair to say that it's been a little bit of friction in doing reference architecture in the past decade or so in CNCF. So that's one of the things that's cool now with the tab driving it, right? Because we can be a lot more pragmatic and we have a lot more cover saying like, this is actually stuff that the people that sent us those reference architecture are running in production. You can't argue that this is, king-making or this is favoring one project or another, because this is actually what's working and running in production, right? So if you feel that, your use case isn't covered, then, you can reach out to the community. Has anyone done this before? And maybe, someone else will submit a reference architecture, like, what were your issues around this? Because there's going to be more than just a fancy picture, right? Because that's not really super helpful. So there'll be additional things that go along with this reference architecture in terms of tips and tricks and what worked well, what didn't work well, and things like that, right? So it's going to be maybe not a full solution guide, but something that's well beyond the reference architecture. So I'm really excited about having the charter from CNCF to be a bit more pragmatic, and that will help us get this to something that's really valuable for all end users instead of trying to figure out how to navigate it. Now we can only publish reference architecture that has pieces that are all part of the cloud native ecosystem, and that's not going to be the case. This is going to be, there might be pieces that are outside the cloud native ecosystem. There might be, God forbid, like a mention of a vendor or something like in there, right? So I think that's going to be really cool because this is real. This is what we're using, right, and what works. And I don't think that there are many companies that are actually running an architecture in production that's 100% taken from the cloud native ecosystem, the big poster of the 200 projects, right? So I think this will be really cool.
I'm not going to spoil the, I can't wait to see it tomorrow, so look forward to it myself. So I'm not going to spoil everything. I'll be very short. Just from a user community perspective, when you're making bets on open source software, sure it's open source, a bunch of high quality open source software in the CNCF, it's easy to make a different choice. Not free, will require work, but understanding the project's relative health and how much you want to invest and weave that dependency into the offering, which ultimately you're providing business value to whoever your client or constituency is. And on the other side, from a feedback perspective, there is no product out there that doesn't survive without good quality feedback. It's a key fundamental piece and foundational to the product development lifecycle. So people being able to find a single front door to provide that feedback, and also a single vessel to consume it for the project maintainers and contributors. It's going to make the products better. It's going to make it easier for end users to provide that feedback, which is ultimately going to benefit everybody in the room. Because regardless of the business that we're in, there's more that we have in common. These projects can help solve many of those like-minded issues, and single front door for feedback and understanding of relative health is really going to help drive people's productivity and adopting more of the CNCF landscape of just amazing projects that all of us couldn't go right on our own. There's billions and billions of dollars of software in there, and like-minded solutions are usually the most diverse as well. It's health and feedback are key and critical to building those.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to add to what Mike said, because as he was alluding to, some of the reliability requirements that we all actually have to support in production environments is super essential. So being able to actually understand project metrics as part of the project health is super important. And this goes back again to production readiness and some of the security as well as reliability and performance, stability guarantees that are being provided by the technology and the projects themselves for being able to operate at scale in production. So again, I think that this is an exciting time where the end user community actually has the capability now to be able to have that impact, because at the end of the day, again, technology is as powerful as its adoption. And it's 1,000x on the end user side versus the technology that's being developed itself.
And I think there's a big untapped resource. Maybe I'm slightly biased being a product manager, but I think that the cloud native ecosystem is pretty fragmented. So there might be a lot of users that have an idea of that they want an enhancement, but they don't really know which project it goes to, right? So how do you figure out which project to? It's easy to find an issue if there's a bug, if there's an issue. But what if you have like an enhancement idea, like this would be a really cool thing, but you don't really know which project it goes to, right? So how do you go ahead and submit that enhancement request when you don't even really know which of the 200 project it lands with, right? And then how do you, if you file it against one project and follow their template, and then, oh no, it should be in this project, then they use another template, and you're going to lose interest pretty quickly, right? So I think that having standardized processes of submitting feedback to the project, working more closely with the projects and giving the end users more of a voice and a direct line of communication to the maintainers and the developers, I think is going to be immensely helpful, both to improve the quality and features of our project, but also, making sure that the projects work on things that the users really need and want. And I don't think the projects necessarily don't work on features. They don't try and avoid features that users want, but they might not need they might not know what the users want because they don't have a really good feedback process other than creating a GitHub issue and then do a thumbs up, right? Which is a pretty crude process in general.
I think one of the big distinctions too about having an end user tab, being able to vet things like reference architectures and other assets that they will inevitably create, is that these will be things that are coming from production workloads from end user companies. It won't be that here's a vendor guide or here's read the docs. It won't be your type of experience. It's going to be real world examples and then options for people to think about or to try, just like all of you are saying. So I'm excited about that. It's the fun part about being in the CNCF are the stories, right? So, when it comes to, and if any of you have any questions, please let us know. We can get you a mic or about halfway back through the crowd here. There's some mics that are in the stands. When you're thinking about all of the things that have gone on this year, do you have any opinions about 2025 and some of the things that we've talked about with direction for what's going to be next for the tab?
I think, again, is building, I think we've set a foundation this year, because we've only been around for like a year, right? And it took a long time to just figure out what processes to have and how to do things. And I think that maybe some things were a bit too ambitious, but I think we'll learn a lot this year. So I think we're set up for success for next year to build on like the things we've done with the project health and reference architecture and feedback to projects. I think that's going to be really exciting to see where we can take that next year. I'd also like to see, just putting a little bit more effort into growing the community, right? I think, like you said earlier, we have about 170 end users and about 800 or so vendors, right? I think I would love to see those be completely shifted. We should have at least a few times more end users than we have vendors in CNCF, right? And I think we want to start setting a foundation on how I think getting these 3 initiatives that we built on this year, I think is going to set a good foundation for starting to grow that, but I want to put even more effort next year into growing just the number of end users and the ways that you all can engage with CNCF, the tab, and the TOC and the project.
Yeah, I think, and absolutely to what Henrik said, it's very critical. I mean, as I said, the end users are kind of the bellwether for the success of different technologies. And needless to say, even if you look at KubeCon attendance numbers and participation numbers, typically there are a lot more end users than there are, the vendor teams who are just presenting. So it is very essential to reflect that also in the process that the tab represents, to be able to provide that feedback, that diversity of opinion, as well as the choices that any end user has for building out a particular stack. And as we go into the world that we are going into with smart, intelligent applications, it is even more imperative to be able to make good technical decisions and well-informed technical choices, and for us as end users to be engaged even more in this ecosystem. Because at the end of the day, as all of you know, if you're operating any kind of smart, intelligent applications and are providing services across the globe, you also need to have the same fabric, at the under the hood in terms of infrastructure. And that's where, do we think Kubernetes is the only solution? Perhaps not. Will we see the evolution of a new generation of what replaces Kubernetes? Perhaps, maybe in the CNCF, right? So again, for us to be engaged in this whole process and this whole discussion is super important for all of us. And that's something that we want to be able to drive with the enablement of more end users to actually interact with the tab, to take on initiatives in the next year which are more closely connected to the interests of the larger community, and also to open up participation in an organized way so that when there are initiatives that we want to kind of take forward, whether that is standardization or interoperability or being able to establish standards for security or observability or production infrastructure, you should be able to have that opportunity through the tab.
I just second what my fellow panelists have said. I strongly agree with all that. There's a lot of stuff. We've done some planning this week. There's a lot of things we probably can't pull sheets off of, but I think one of the I'm most optimistic about, Taylor, and to your question in 2025, is that there are already a lot of really well-established processes that require a lot of mind share and really hard work from already dedicated people. So I'm super excited to bring the user community's voice to those processes, help augment them where possible, enrich them, and to be able to collaborate with people that are already doing a ton of this work already, given, as Henrik said, we've only been around about a year, but I think there's already so many amazing things that are going on within the CNCF that require a lot of muscle and horsepower that we were really excited to bring the user community's voice to that, but also our experiences and how we can represent that, and whether it's technical architecture or use cases and studies, so that people that are a little bit fresher in their journey maybe don't have to learn those lessons that we've already learned, or they can take advantage of an opportunity that somebody else scaled from or didn't have to stub their toe on. So I'm really excited to see where we can just collaborate more with what's already going on, and where we take that in the future with the user community's voice.
Cool. With that, any questions? Oh.
Just following up on that conversation, for engineers in end user organizations, what suggestions do you have for them to actually provide incentives to participate and justify it to their managers?
I'm happy to go. Okay, so I think number one, we can't write all the things, right? One of the biggest value proposition of open source is that, one, you get to work with people that have a similar problem that you do, you need to solve for. Maybe it doesn't solve all your problems, but if you have a checklist of 10, it might solve 9, you only have to work on the 1. Or you might be able to contribute it upstream, right? So none of these companies have the ability to write everything. So you have the opportunity to work with people, use established patterns, standards, implement them yourself, or even use tools that have been implemented from them that are open standards that are transferable company to company that adopt these standards. And then making sure that you don't make it as, I'm doing something different than my normal daily development. Your software engineers and your product managers, they need to understand that if you're taking that material dependency that your business product now depends on to deliver the value to your clients, it is a material component of your underlying software infrastructure, whatever it is, and you should be interested. It saves you money, being more aware of what's going on, being able to issue bug tickets or even fix the bug yourself, put the enhancement in, drives mean time to business value delivery for your clients faster. And open source typically comes in that, like, it's all qualitative and you're working with other people, and it's really hard to quantify for senior execs a lot, but when you break it down to how do I get the business value to the clients quicker, higher quality, open source typically is higher quality, better documented, better tested code. So there are a lot of things. I'd love to ramble on for minutes, but I'm going to share the mic. But I think there's a ton of ways to do it, but making sure that you focus on the business value and what you expect to get out of it, and making sure it's not bifurcated, like it's different from what you're already doing.
Yeah, and we can see it. How many of you have used a vendor product and never talked to the vendor? You never ask them for anything. I mean, open source is not really different. Like if you work with your vendors to ask for features or learn about the product, open source is not really any different, right? So you should see these CNCF projects the same way, like interact with them just as you would with the vendor, right? And I don't think that anyone here would buy a product and then just, okay, we're just going to use it and never really think about it or talk to the vendor again, right? So I'm just going to stop about that with the project thing. But I think that's one way of seeing it, or at least one part of working together with the end user community is like, help you make the projects better, right? And I think that's something that I think that anyone would have a hard time arguing against. Like, why would you not want to work with the project you're using in production to make them better?
Yeah, and I think to your question, right? Again, there is no solution that any of us, whether they're large enterprises or small organizations, are using, which are not a stack, right? That is, you're using different layers of technologies as part of the stack. So when you're engaging in open source, at this point in time where the cloud native ecosystem has been well established now for over 10 years, and more than that, you have a plethora of choices that you can make. Not only do you have vendor choices, but you also have open source choices. But then the next challenge that I think all of us are working with and working through is scale. Because at the end of the day, again, you can write all the products you want, you can build all the solutions you want, but if you really want to run services at scale, you actually need to factor that in as part of the fabric of what you're building. And it is, again, super important to understand that in the generation of infrastructure and technology, the platform layer that we're in, You actually have to incorporate platform features, which are scale, reliability, performance, security. All of these is part of the feature set of open source technologies. And that's the area that we are all working in, and expect to kind of take that feedback, take the understand requirements from different end users, and be able to provide that back to the project, so that that feature set also gets developed in the same way that other features that we use on the application side are developed.
Unfortunately, I need to run, but I will see you all in the keynote tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Just so you know, we're assigning all of the action items to Henrik since he's lead. We have a question.
Yeah, I'm a little shocked about the number of end users that were actually out there, and I think the ratio of that to vendors is something I've been thinking about since I heard it a few minutes ago. There's two parts to this question, but I only want to give one of the parts. As it relates to vendors and other parts of the solution where they're doing a product that's based on a project and reaching out to those end users, is there any way that we can capitalize the vendors slash the partners to say, hey, these are also end users? So we'll pick on Argo since he just left. It's fun. People that use Argo that don't know that it runs on Kubernetes, and people that are using things like Acuity and Octopus Deploy and everything like that, those are potential end users too that you don't hear of because of the stigma that this is only for Kubernetes end users. So my question is how do we solve that?
Yeah. I think from a foundational perspective at the CNCF, there's a designation of end users because there was a problem early on, right? When the community was just starting, we're talking like 2015, 2016, where you got all these cloud native people together, and then everyone was trying to sell everyone products and things like that. And so end users needed a safe space to be able to have these conversations. And now we have that governing body to be able to have those kinds of conversations without somebody coming in with a sales pitch kind of thing. We have end user groups too, where there aren't vendors allowed or permitted because of that. Even with good intent, typically conversations move towards sales. And so by creating those groups, that creates that safe space to be able to have that kind of conversation. And then some of the difficulty with just being transparent, that's what we do, we're an open source foundation, is end users having the time. And so the pressure gets put onto the foundation to become really valuable, right? Save time, save money, make it easy to learn, provide useful things. And by creating this tab, I mean, that's definitely what the aim is here, is to make something that's a lot more relevant. We can do research, we've done training and certification, these education type things from a foundational perspective, but we got to stay toe-to-toe with all of the end users and everything going on that front. So that's why I'm really excited about reference architectures, and some other surprises tomorrow. It's hard to keep surprises in open source, but there are some really good ones tomorrow. But yeah, stay tuned on that front.
Well said. I have nothing to add.
Cool. Yeah.
Absolutely. Nothing to add.
Yeah, PR's welcome.
Yeah.
Alina?
Yeah, I have a question about the reference architecture. Is it going to be completely vendor agnostic, or will there be some vendor bits in addition to open source?
I think if you look at the reference architectures that have already been published by the tab, as Henrik was mentioning earlier, we looked at a couple of paths in how these reference architectures could be useful to other end users. And there were two paths, obviously. One could be to generalize, the architecture to be just an, suggestion rather than an implementation, right? And then the other path, which was also deliberated on, was to actually lay it out as it is, right? And I think that as an open source body and an open source foundation, we did look at how we could actually represent the reality that end users face, where you know, if you were to only say, I'm going to select the CNCF project, you know, technology stack, does that really work? So the answer was most of the time no, because end users, as you know, typically do have, you know, 3 types of implementations. They can have open source components, which are components in the stack and the solutions they're building. They could have vendor solutions, which are, you know, also in that stack. And then they can also have legacy custom implementations from within the organization, which is also, you could call it glue code or glue applications, or, you know, everything that binds the stack together for the business. And if you were to give reference implementations which are only, you know, very agnostic and a generalized suggestion, the value of a reference architecture is kind of lost, because then you're not actually learning from, you know, if you look at somebody, an organization's reference architecture, and you say, hey, you know, in these spaces, we only have, you know, solutions of this sort, and we actually don't have any open source alternatives here. That's very obvious when you look at, you know, actual real reference implementations. So long story short, we did decide to go with actual reference implementations. And again, it's a huge thanks to the companies who have already come forward to actually publish them. And there are a whole bunch of others in the pipeline.
More to come, right? It's a pull request.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a great question. I love the path that we took, number one. I look at it like buying a house, right? Buying an empty house is hard to do. It's hard to imagine yourself in there without furniture and things in it. Seeing actual implementation of reference architecture for companies, all the tools and all the glue, as was mentioned, that you don't see on the gigantic landscape that's maybe subtly overwhelming when you look at it in aggregate, right? How do you stitch Argo CD and some of these other tools together? How do you run a global service mesh with Istio? How do you leverage Cert Manager to provide autonomous updates and deployments of your certificate chain of trust in a way that follows your GitOps model? The instructions really don't come in the little boxes on that landscape. This reference architecture is going to tie it together, help you imagine yourself in that house and say, oh, we have something similar to that. We stitch things together like that too, to help you kind of get to your path and your journey, and ultimately delivering business value with these amazing tools.
Yeah, and if anybody has a Rube Goldberg type machine that combines all 200 plus projects, let us know. We just want to see it. I don't know if it's viable. Yeah.
No, we'll put an LLM to work on that.
That's a good question, yeah. We still want to see it. Yeah. Any other questions? We have time for probably about one more, and then I'll definitely be sticking around a little bit. You know, if you have time, feel free to stick around, and we'd love to chat with you one-on-one. But any other questions? Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming out today. We're excited to share even more tomorrow at the keynote, and hope you have a fantastic KubeCon.
Thanks for coming out. Enjoy.